Can your personal beliefs determine your retirement readiness? Today, we're talking about the latest research from TIAA about financial literacy, longevity, and retirement readiness. We've got Patrice Sikora helping us out today. Patrice, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Beautiful weather here today, so I'm really feeling good.
I believe it's. I'm heading out to State Fair later today, so it'll be a fun Wisconsin time.
I am jealous. I am jealous. But we're talking about retirement here, Jeremy. And money and our assets are things we can count, we can forecast. But how long we live, well, that is something else. So most of us can look to our parents and grandparents for some hints. But, Jeremy, how can we plan for retirement when we really don't know how long it could be?
Well, that's why we talk about it so much. This idea of your longevity, it is the number one risk to your retirement. And that's why I'm always looking for the latest research and TIAA Institute, part of TIAA Craft. They've got some great stuff out there. I just read a 22-page report. I'm not going to bother reading you the 22-page report. We're just going to talk it through. But
That's why we have you.
that's right. That's right. Well, it's called Financial Literacy, Longevity Literacy, and Retirement Readiness. And that financial literacy is probably something you hear more about in the newspaper. But longevity literacy, just your ideas, beliefs, knowledge of what longevity is, how does that and your beliefs and knowledge about financial matters, how does that go into your retirement readiness? That's what they went through. And I'm going to break it down into a bit of a summary here so that you've got a good idea of what it is. And then I've got kind of some, I'm going to call it some mantras that we want you to listen to and remember, because I think that'd be the way to maybe, I don't know if combat, but overcome some gaps in most people's financial literacy, most people's longevity literacy. You got to figure there's gaps. Why would we be talking about it? If they wrote an article
Whole
and said, "Oh,
article, yeah.
everything's good."
I've never even heard the phrase longevity literacy.
I mean, me neither, which is a great way that they phrased it
Yeah.
on there, and they did some different things to go through and just kind of just see how your thoughts on longevity affect your retirement readiness. Because in a way, if you think about it, if you think you have less control over certain areas, you won't take the control that you do have. And
Mhm.
sometimes your belief in how much you can control things is related to your knowledge and background and beliefs there. So let me just summarize a few bits of it. And one thing that was interesting, the first piece of it is that longevity affects your retirement more than inflation, which is interesting because and let's try to break it down. Why would that be the case? Why would
Really?
longevity affect your retirement more than inflation? My thought, and tell me what your thought might be, Patrice, but my thought is, well, everybody gets the same inflation, relatively speaking. Like we all live in America. We all pay relatively the same cost of bread and milk and gas. But your longevity, that's kind of the big variable
Hmm.
up and down because we all have different health, all have different family history. Tell me your thought right off the bat.
Right off the bat, it comes down to income. Inflation affects those with a lower income more than it does those with higher income, simply because you're paying more of the basics out of a smaller base. But with the longevity then counted in, that could be a very potent formula for, well, I want to say struggling, but hopefully not. Hopefully you've planned for it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bit of it. Like you're right on that inflation affects people in different ways. And of course, the less money you have, the more of your money
Mm.
goes towards your basics. So inflation affects you more. You got less wiggle room. But
Right.
it's almost more this variability, just the wider unknown of longevity that really can affect your retirement. Because if you
Sure.
truly just don't know what's going to happen, you got to plan for a longer time frame than really you might normally have to, right?
Mhm. And how long, again, we come back to how long is long anymore?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. It's probably longer than you think is really what it comes to. But let me go through a couple other things about this. Well, let me go right to this part, which is half of Americans don't know something about retirement longevity, right? If they
Mhm.
asked, they did a survey and said, how long do you think you'll live in retirement? Most people said, I don't know. Well, how are you going to plan if you don't know?
Right.
Or a lot of people underestimated. And then they did this correlation of, are you ready for retirement? And how much do you know about longevity? And the less you knew about longevity, the less prepared you were for retirement. And it goes back to that sense of control. The psychologists call it agency, where if you just kind of think, I have no control over it, I don't know, who knows, right? Well, why would you bother getting ready for it? Why would you bother learning more about it? But you can learn about longevity. And some things about longevity is that when you hit retirement and you're 60, you're 65, you're a survivor. You've made it past a lot of other people. So you can't use a longevity number of 78. That's an estimate from birth. Well, if you beat out the 20% of people that didn't make it to your age, your estimate's now longer. And so it's something that you need to take a look at. We talk about it all the time. Look at the longevityillustrator.org. Go ahead, get your own personal longevity estimate, not just the estimate of here's the one specific date that's an average, but it gives you a range of here's what's most likely going to happen. Another interesting thing they found when they're seeing how knowledgeable about you are you about longevity, men underestimated their longevity a lot more than women did.
Hmm.
And let's give an extra point to the ladies, right? The ladies get it right more than the guys. But I think this is actually a bad thing because in my experience, there's a lot of longevity decisions around Social Security and pensions, right? These are things that last your whole lifetime. And guess who's making a lot of these decisions? If it's a male female couple, it seems like the men are making the decisions more often than the women, but the women are more prepared. And in fact, it's the women that are going to feel the effects of it.
Yeah.
So this is just a double whammy that it's bad that the men need to up their game here, guys. Let's up our game.
And the women need to up their game by getting involved a little bit more.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's because it affects them. It affects them, and they're holding on to the knowledge. Let's try to educate the guys here that are maybe making these decisions. So it's interesting that they went through and said if you have poor knowledge of your finances, if you underestimate longevity, you're more likely to be disappointed. You're more likely to be underprepared for your retirement. And that's what we want to go through today. So I guess we gave you some of the sobering facts from the 22-page study, and we'll link to the study. You'll have it there in the show notes in the comments where you can go ahead and read about it. Well, let's go through. We've got really kind of 4 things. I broke down 2 each on longevity, 2 on the money piece of it, on the financial literacy, so that you can be better prepared for your retirement, so that the outcomes, the suggestions from the study just don't have to be your path, right? You can go ahead and learn some things. That's really what I think they're getting at is go ahead, learn these things so that you're better off in retirement.
Right.
And I'm going to start with longevity. Just like you said, this longevity literacy, haven't quite heard that term before. I hadn't heard that term before.
As you said,
Let's talk about it.
like the phrase. I like it.
Yeah.
It puts it all
Well,
together.
it's got alliteration. I think your journalism days likes the alliteration.
Yes.
Yeah. So we got longevity literacy. And here's the first thing I want you to think of. Your life expectancy, or here's the way to say it, is life expectancy is not death certainty, right? If you think your life expectancy is 80, what are the actual odds you'll die at the exact age of 80? Well, I'm a math guy. I looked up the odds. 4%. 4% chance that you will die at the age of your life expectancy.
That's itty bitty. That's itty bitty.
Right. Yeah. If you're 60 years old, if you're 65 and you project out and say your life expectancy is 80, 85, 90, whatever the number is, you really look at what are the odds, how many people truly die at that exact 1 year, and it's about 4%. You have a 4% chance of actually dying at your life expectancy age. Remember, life expectancy is just the average in the middle of all the possible outcomes. Half the people are below, half the people are after, right? It's It's a range, it's a probability, it's a distribution, a lot of big fancy terms. But think about this. If there's two of you in a couple, and on average, you die on average, well, one's probably below, one's probably after, right? Think of it that way. Chances are pretty good in a couple, neither one of them will die at their life expectancy. And that means a couple things. You can't plan for the exact age. You can't say, I plugged in 80 and that's exactly it. I'm good to go. Chances are very good you will die below or after that age, whatever it happens to be. And like I said earlier, if you're a couple, chances are one will be below average, one will be above average. So if you plan for that average, you're planning for an amount of time where somebody is going to be around, right?
Right.
It's going to happen, right? There's going to be somebody that lives longer, and chances are they'll be living longer than average. So when you're planning things out, and if you say the male's 85 and the female's 90, well, chances are somebody's going to live beyond the averages. You can't just plug in age 90. You've got to plug in a few years beyond that. And that's why going through and using that longevityillustrator.org is the way to both get your own averages, and they'll show you here's what happens a little bit after the averages. And that's really what you ought to be looking at. So remember that life expectancy is not death certainty. The second part of longevity is your DNA is not your destiny. When we talk to people and say one of the first things we've got to figure out is how long you might live in retirement. And part of living in retirement is when you start, and part of it's when you finish your retirement. The first thing they think of is, well, all the men in my family die at 75, or my grandparents made it to the 80s, or my aunts and uncles, my parents. Think about your grandparents. They might have 60 years of medical advances that they did not get to enjoy, right?
True.
Even your parents, you probably have 20 or 25 years of medical advances that you get to enjoy that your parents didn't get to enjoy, right? When you're in your 80s, the medicine, the exercise regimens, that everything that's out there is 20, 25, 30 years advanced compared to what your parents are going through. And a lot of times when we dig in and say, okay, all the men in your family die at 75, all the ladies live to 95, or whatever these kind of thoughts are related to DNA, especially when it's maybe an early situation, right? I don't think I'll make it past here because nobody else made it past here. Well, tell me what got to them. A lot of those deaths aren't DNA, they're lifestyle. It's all the smoking, all the red meat, all the physical labor. It's all the no exercise. It's all the military wars that were going on in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s that thankfully haven't been going on too much lately, at least not for the folks that are hitting retirement right now, where a lot of the things that maybe caused all the early deaths aren't DNA, but actually lifestyle. So remember that your DNA, what's happened kind of to your parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, doesn't necessarily mean that's your exact destiny when it comes to your longevity.
Got it. I do especially like the medical point that you made. There have been so many advances in the past 20 years that we are benefiting from.
Yeah, I was listening to somebody speak. It's Midwest Athletes Against Childhood Cancer. So they're talking about childhood cancer, and here we are talking about 65-year-olds. But what the director was saying is when they started 40 years ago, if a child got cancer, the death rate was something like 80%, 90%.
Sure.
I don't know the exact terms, but what he said is, at this point, that's the survival rate, right? They've flipped it around. That in the past 40 years, they've taken this horrible death rate when you're diagnosed with cancer and swapped it. So it's a high number of the survival rate. And so that's just an example that I'm thinking of. But there's so many of them out there of how things have thankfully improved with all the medicine, with I mean, just anything, diets, DNA, all kinds of stuff is moving in the right direction.
Sure.
So let's talk about the financial literacy, the money side of things. And I want you to remember that your decisions have more impact than the politicians or the economy, right? We hear about people, the politicians are raising taxes, and they raise it from 12% to 15%. Well, that's a 20% increase. That's no fun. Or we hear about inflation going from 3% to 6% because of things that the politicians or what's going on in the economy, right? That's a 3 percentage point difference there for you. When you file for Social Security, you have a choice between a number at 62 or a number at 70 that's 76% higher, right? You have more control over what your Social Security amount is. You have more control over when you retire. You have more control over how much money you spend than any politician, any company, any economy. And I think that was what part of the research was showing, is when you felt that you didn't have control because you didn't have that knowledge, then you somewhat just gave up, threw up your hands and say, what can I do? You can do a lot. And when you take that control, when you educate yourself, you come out so far ahead. That's the way to approach it. You get control over when you retire, how much money you spend, how much you keep in the stock market, how much you keep out of the stock market. There's a lot of control there for you.
Wow. And it's something you don't think about when it comes to when to take. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about Social Security, but that is such a boondoggle. It's such a morass of questions and issues. What's the right answer? There is no one right answer.
Yeah. And it's figuring out what the right answer is for you is the right way to go. And the second piece, when it comes to your financial literacy, and I'm sticking to this control idea because I believe that's a big deal for everyone, is when you take the control, you can take over your destiny when it comes to retirement. When you hit retirement, you have more control over your taxes than ever before. We talk to people who are 62, 63, they haven't retired yet. They don't realize that. A couple years later, especially after we work with them, they realize, oh my goodness, I have so much control over my taxes. You have so much flexibility in retirement over your taxes. And when you take that control, you can pay taxes when you want to, as opposed to when you're forced to. And usually when you pay taxes when you want to, it's because you're doing it because it's at a lower tax situation compared to when you're being forced to do it. You're just letting someone else control that for you. And just think of what the control you have over your taxes. Well, Social Security is one of them we've already talked about. Social Security will be taxable somewhat at the federal level, and you get to control when you start that Social Security. Think of your investments. You might have investments in a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, a brokerage account, a savings account. That's 4 different types of accounts. There's 4 different types of taxation going on. And you get to choose when you take the money out and which account you take it from. Well, even speaking of when you take the money out, you can take the money out in December, but spend it in January. That's a different year. That's different tax years.
But a lot of people don't understand this, Jeremy, and that's why they need someone like you, someone like a financial professional. And you've got to start planning ahead of time.
That's exactly it. And even then, thinking of control, I've just recently started working with a couple who's 77 years old, and they said, well, it's too late for me now. Well, no, it's not. Their previous advisor said, oh, you're too old for Roth conversions. So did he do any math to figure that out? Let's run the math to figure out if you're too old, quote unquote, for Roth conversions. Well, we ran the math, and we thought for their situation, if they do Roth conversions in 2023, 24, and 25, they'll end up saving about 60 grand in taxes over their lifetime. Now, is that worth it to them or not? They get to decide it, but we did the math, and there's no age limit on Roth conversions. So to say you're too old for Roth conversions, especially without doing the math, even if you did the math, the phrase you're too old doesn't apply when it comes to Roth conversions, right? It just doesn't apply. Do the math and take the control and find out. They got to find out, and here they are. They get to go ahead and they're taking advantage of those.
Fantastic. You're never too old. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the whole point is when you want to take control and you haven't ever faced retirement before, that's why we came up with our 5-step retirement process. I'll just talk about it real brief, and we'll link to some videos. You can go we've got an advertisement through this. You might have heard it already on the podcast. But if you go to 5stepretirementplan.com, it'll take you through all 5 steps. But I'll just share them with you right now. The first one is thinking of how much money you will spend in retirement. That's the first step. And that spending part of it is your take-home pay. Part of it is your taxes. Part of it is your healthcare costs. Part of it is when do you retire and how long might you live in retirement, right? So that's that longevity literacy coming in. That's the first thing you need to figure out is how much you're going to spend in retirement, because that's what you're solving for, trying to make sure you have enough in retirement. So you better make that number one. Number two is how much are you going to make in retirement? Just because you stop working doesn't mean you stop making money. Just about everyone has Social Security. They might have a pension. They might have annuities or real estate. These are all items, areas where you make money in retirement, even though you're not working and getting a W-2. And maximizing how much you make in retirement will maximize how much you get to spend in retirement. These are big one-time decisions we'd like you to make next, right? After you figure out when you're going to retire, how much you need to spend, let's figure out how to make you the most money from these items like that. The third part is to figure out your tax planning in retirement. Your tax planning in retirement, again, you've got so much control over that, where you don't have to wait till required minimum distribution age to take money out of your IRA. You don't have to take Social Security at a certain amount of time. We would like you to project out your taxes over your lifetime. We do that with our software program, where we project out your taxes over your lifetime and say, well, what if you did something different? And if you did something different, here's how it affects things. Well, let's go ahead and do that different thing. If it's going to lower your taxes, go ahead and do that different thing. And when it comes to tax planning, the general rule is when your taxes are lower, pay your taxes then, right? Pay your taxes when they're low, avoid your taxes with your high. That's a big piece of it. The fourth step is talking about your investments. How much money do you put into the market? How much money do you take out of the market? And notice how those investments are number 4. Right? Most people that walk into our office, they're asking about, should I buy this stock? Should I buy that bond? Should I buy that annuity? They're telling us that their advisor only talks about investments. Investments are important. They're kind of the fuel that gets your car to where you're going, but you got to figure out where you're going, right? That's the spending part. You got to figure out the first part that you get to control, the second part that you get to control, the third part that you get to control with your taxes. You got to figure out all those things before you start talking about the investments. And with the investments, that is the one thing you've got less control over. But go ahead and take the control that you have. You can control how much you put into the market, how much you take out of the market. You can control how much risk you have up and down. Go ahead and take that control with the investments on there. And then finally, the fifth part is taking a look at your legacy and your risks. I like to say it's the risk to your retirement and the remainder that's left over, right? If you die early, there might be a risk that your spouse doesn't have enough income. Mm-hmm. If you live a long time, usually the longer you live, the worse your health gets and the higher the healthcare costs. There's long-term care you need to consider in there. And of course, all of us are going to finish out our retirement at some point in time. And it's wise to have the estate documents, the plans in place to make life smoother for your kids, right, when that happens. So that's the 5-step retirement plan. I'd encourage everyone to go to 5stepretirementplan.com. Just put in your email and it'll send you each of those videos. We send it out to you once per day because it's kind of a, you want to really get it, right?
Digest
so that's why we send
all,
it to you once per day for you. Yep.
Jeremy, that's fantastic. Now we're going to have all the links for these in the show notes, correct?
Yep. We'll have all the links in there in the show notes. And I got to say thank you to all the great researchers that I get to read at TIAA and everywhere. It's so much fun for me to learn these things and get to share them with you. So it's a great thing. So thank you, Patrice, for coming on and being a part of the show today.
And how can listeners reach you, Jeremy, if they've got more questions? And boy, I'm sure they do.
I believe it. Well, the podcast is Retirement Revealed. So go to retirement-revealed.com. That's probably the easiest way to click on and contact us that way.
Well, obviously planning for retirement is a topic that never grows old. See what I did there? See what I did there?
Yes.
Right. So
I love it.
follow this podcast for follow this podcast for more insights from Jeremy and all these possible choices you have to consider. Share with others as well. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Patrice, and thanks for listening to the Retirement Reveal podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions.